a mean world out there. And it's a meaner age. Let's change the culture. Let's change the way we think about this world. Let's have a hell of a time doing it. Welcome to Mean Age Daydream, a home for comedy, a home for some politics, and a daydream of a world that doesn't suck. I'm Brian McWilliams. Welcome to this mad world. Yes, welcome to Mean Age Daydream, everybody. I am unbelievably excited to have a very special guest with me today, Dr. Barbara Kolm, who I had the honor of meeting in Austria. Flew over there for the Austrian Economics Conference, and Barbara's coming at a perfect time to join us because let me tell you some of her unbelievably impressive resume, her positions. Well, first off, Barbara, hello, welcome.
Hey, Brian. Good to see you again.
You too.
Life in Vienna.
I'm very curious to hear about how life in Vienna is currently, by the way. But let me tell people, let me wow them with some of your positions here, because I want people to know just how impressive Barbara is, not only from a career standpoint, from a libertarian perspective, from a free market standpoint. It is an honor to have you. So Barbara is the vice president of the general counsel of the Österreichische National Bank. She is also the president of the Hayek Institute, director of the Austrian Economics Center, and the founder of the Free Market Roadshow. Now, you probably have heard in the past, I've referenced the Free Market Roadshow and, of course, the Austrian Economics Conference because I was honored to have been at the last economics conference that you held in Vienna as a guest, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. Incredible event. And I'm very curious to hear how the Free Market Roadshow's gone this year because I mean, everything that's happened in the world, right, the last couple of years seems to lend itself to our messaging. So tell me a little bit about what's happened on the Free Market Roadshow, and then I want to hear how you got to where you are, too, because I think that's going to be an interesting thing to hear about.
Well, the Free Market Roadshow, this is actually the best invention we actually had in Austria during the past 15 years. In other words, we have been on tour for 15 years live, apart from the last 2 years, where in 2021 we did live events and remote events, but in 2020 we were locked in as everybody else was. But this year our planning was perfect. All our partners, more than 120 by the way, in Europe,
wow,
were able to pull it off, and we had fabulous events from Israel onward to Georgia, to the North, Scandinavia, Stockholm, London, Lisbon, everywhere across Europe. More than 30 cities in Europe that we visited, and where we were discussing free market solutions to today's problems. And of course, everybody was kind of really super well and happy to have our great speakers, because we had international speakers from across the world, from different levels, whether they were business people or whether they were intellectuals, think tankers, students from across who wanted to debate and go to the roots of the current issues. I mean, inflation, for example, was a big topic everywhere, the lockdowns, the consequences of COVID policies across the world. So those were the things that were discussed. And of course, this can all be seen at our Free Market Roadshow website, and which you will definitely announce later.
I shall, yeah. And I'll put all the links to everything that the Austrian Economics Center is doing with Free Market Roadshow and you yourself. So we'll do that in the show notes so people can easily find them. But let's talk a little bit about you. And I mean, you're widely regarded as one of the top libertarian thinkers in Europe, not only as a female libertarian, which, you know, we're rarer. Fortunately, they're becoming less rare these days. But tell me a little bit about your getting into free market philosophy and libertarian philosophy.
Well, you know, the thing is, I grew up in the Tyrol. The Tyrol has always been a pretty independent state in Austria. And for centuries, actually, the Tyrolean farmers fought for their independence. They didn't have to go to war for the emperor. They only had to go for war for their local Tyrolean landlord, or the taxes also went to the local guy and not to the state. So this is something that was, of course, truly important for the Tyroleans, and we simply love our freedom. So this is one thing. The second thing, I was privileged to be born in a family that was truly libertarian in the pro-market, classical libertarian sense. And I remember when Hayek, for example, was awarded the Nobel Prize in economics in 1974, we were debating that on our dinner table. And our parents educated us this way to be open and to learn, to be to love competition, to be self-responsible, and all those values that actually libertarians and freedom-loving people cherish. And so this was my first connection to Hayek. And then later at the university in Austria, they don't teach Austrian economics at universities. If you're lucky, you touch upon Schumpeter, and that's basically it. But even in the philosophy courses you don't learn much. But
that was something that's shocking, and I apologize to interrupt you, but I remember I was shocked to hear that. And there was a wonderful tour that was provided to us, going through the city centers and kind of pointing out the different economic highlight zones, and talking about Hayek, of course. And yeah, I couldn't believe that you have this unbelievable economic mind that just isn't taught. It's like they're trying to, is it an intentional writing of history to omit Hayek's work?
Well, the point is, Hayek unfortunately was not very popular in Europe in general until Thatcher and Reagan. And even then he was only popular in conservative circles and in some intellectual circles who did not follow the Keynesian masses. And we've seen a welfare state in Europe, and in Austria actually, that rose from the 70s onwards, that totally embraced Keynesian economics. And then you just don't discuss what the libertarian solution would be. Because if we look at one of the great guys in German history who made the German economic miracle possible after World War II was Ludwig Erhard. And he was a total believer in markets and in individual and entrepreneurial freedom. As a matter of fact, he debated he actually was able to get rid of the price controls, and he debated that with General Clay, who was in charge of Germany back then. And this is how the Germans got to growth and to well-being and to their miracle. This was entirely pro-market libertarian solutions. But again, once you have the growth, and then everybody's well off, all of a sudden the pendulum swings back. Yeah. And of course, understandable, and this is what Hayek also argued, we have to help those who cannot help themselves. The question is just to which extent and who.
Yeah.
If it's the individuals, the privates, or if it's the state. And there you have the constant debate. And yeah. That's what probably kicked the Austrians back in Austria, but now we are back again. And we definitely, when we run conferences and when we work, we always claim we are the Austrians.
Right. Well, I interrupted you. So to get back to again, how your own career. So we left off, they're not really teaching much of Hayek in the universities. So tell me where you went from there to push your career forward to find, become, again, the president of the wonderful Hayek Institute and become the director of the Austrian Economics Center and, of course, a renowned lecturer.
Well, again, I was privileged and lucky. First of all, because of my family background. Secondly, because I got curious, and as an entrepreneur, you always need to make sure that you're not overregulated, that you're not overtaxed, and then you ask certain questions. And I was lucky when I was in the US as a young student. I got into some classes where Austrian school and Hayek especially was taught. And then once you have this in your head, you just don't lose it. Right. And then later in my career in politics, and local politics, in my hometown, and then you find out, well, you definitely have to ask the right questions. and those where how do we become competitive as a business and labor location. And this you can only look and find out if you do the right structural reforms. And guess who did the reforms and who is arguing for these reforms? It's always the people who believe in markets and who believe on a conservative, libertarian, pro-market side.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about Austria now, and for I didn't explicitly say this, but you are involved in recommendations in public policy, in how the government and I guess how infrastructure and government are functioning together with public policy. So Barbara is tied in pretty intricately with what's going on in Austria. Where would you say the country is now emerging from the pandemic? I mean, as you said, because the economics aren't necessarily taught and aren't pushed from a free market perspective, and the country had swung more towards a more socialistic aspect. Are you finding that is swinging back the other way now? Has the pendulum started to come back because of the actions, or are people still in this fear mode?
Well, we have put a lot of money on the plate during the pandemic, as many other countries bailing out enterprises, doing extra solutions with regards to labor markets, so-called Kurzzeitarbeit, which is short-term labor. Being more flexible, all of a sudden, all those people who work from home, and we have, of course, industry has suffered a lot because of the lockdowns, the supply chains. All this together has cost a lot of money, and in the end, it's the taxpayer who will have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you. From an inflationary standpoint, where is Austria situated right now? I mean, in the United States, we're experiencing, the government's telling us it's something like 8.6%. I mean, realistically, it's vastly higher than that. I was just reading a piece from, oh my gosh, Jeffrey Tucker. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeffrey Tucker.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, yeah, I love Jeffrey, but he had done some deep diving into our American cost of the supply chains, the cost for shipping, and which is just astronomically higher. And so the real life inflation we're seeing is probably closer to, 11, 12, 13, 14%. So where is the market in Austria situated, and is that helping you?
We are about 8%, kind of the average in the European and the EU and in the Eurozone. However, there are countries who have much lower inflation, like Switzerland, but they are not a Eurozone country. And then, of course, we have countries with much higher inflation. But, it's not as easy as that. This time, we've had various reasons for this inflation that all of a sudden burst. When we had the so-called green shift, green technology, green politics that were embraced by the European Commission and by the European Parliament, and then went over to the European Central Bank. But this was announced prior to the pandemic, unfortunately, and this was kind of one trigger. Then we had supply and demand shocks as a consequence of the lockdowns caused by COVID, which was the second kind of shock. And the third external shock right now that we see is the war that is going on in Ukraine. So those are three different reasons. And the most important reason that is hardly being discussed, but that we should name at first, is actually the amount of money being in circulation, and that the interest rates have been negative for 10 years in a row in the Eurozone. And those are, of course, also for additional reasons. I mean, most importantly, the amount of money being circulated that rose ever after the European Stability Mechanism has been put into place in 2012, 2013, after the so-called financial crisis hit Europe in 2008. And ever since, we have risen the amount. The pandemic emergency programs and the APP The asset purchasing programs from the ECB have been shut. They are done now as of end of June, and we now took the first hike in interest rates by 0.25 as of July.
Okay, so they've been a little bit less aggressive. Sorry, my dog's walking through the room. Apologies. It's early here. You can see the sunlight blasting me from the side. There we go. Let me put him outside. Apologies. This is
No problem.
the early morning recording. So obviously, since Barbara's in Austria and I am in Los Angeles, it's tricky getting it set up. But
9 hours time difference.
right. So that's interesting. So the central bank there has done a little bit of a slower correction for interest rates because the Federal Reserve here just raised it by 0.75, which was a huge increase comparatively, although I still don't know if it's going to be enough to truly combat inflation in any regard. So from your perspective, what do you think needs to be done? I mean, is it possible to do a true correction to inflation and rein it in without completely crashing the system as it's set up at this point?
Well, first of all, as already started, the PEP programs and the APP programs are definitely, hopefully, history, and they are running out. First thing. Second thing, interest rates are being risen step by step, very carefully. Another thing, but and that's the most important thing. Monetary policy and fiscal policy has not been separated over the past years and almost decades now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that should be kept separate. Monetary policy and the central banks should be totally independent, and whereas Brussels, in this case, in Europe, or Washington, indeed, should do what they should do on the fiscal level. And here I am, where I would argue that there should be done a lot of work, namely structural reforms, making sure that enterprises become more productive. Not only enterprises, but the entire labor force is more productive in order to be competitive and in order to get back on track, in order to fight the problems that inflation will create eventually. So productivity is key. And if we do not get back on this track, I think Europe will lose out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the similar thing we're seeing in the United States as well. And I recall when I was in Austria and we're seeing it here and on a global scale, there is a labor shortage. So when we talk about productivity, it's difficult for companies to get back into the market competitively just because finding people to actually do the labor is difficult. And for me, it seems that this is a direct result of the programs, to basically paying people to stay home and not go to work. And I don't know if now the savings have accrued where they don't have to go, but it just seems impossible that there are so many opportunities and job openings that are just open constantly. And I mean, is it the same in Europe right now? Is it the same in Austria where it's just a shortage of labor that you can't get the productivity level up?
It's totally true. If we look at, for example, tourism, which is a main part of Austria's industry or a wealth creator, hotels, restaurants, really find it hard to find stuff and to be able to open 24/7 or to run their restaurants and bars at decent times. They would have to cut the opening short, or also hotels. It's hard to get stuff to clean, and it's hard to stuff cooking stuff. It's tough, and one of the results, obviously, is that a huge mind change after 2 years of being locked in. People don't want to go back to this risky job in tourism on the one hand, and then they have been paid for not being kind of working in their fields for way too long. Mm-hmm. So I think the entire lockdown policies were a huge mistake. But at the end, you always know better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The hindsight 2020. Although I would argue that people of our mindset knew in advance that paying people to not work never typically works out. I think in any time it's been tried, it has not worked out. What would you say is a prescription to try to get things back on track? I mean, I was arguing on a previous show I did that from a governmental standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, and you'll probably agree with this, that you have to absolutely slash regulations to make it easier for people to be productive, to produce, the shortage of goods and the shortage of supplies, to make it simpler, to lower a barrier for entry, and also to incentivize people. We know everything with economics is risk assessment, right? When it comes to creating a business and running a business, it's risk assessment. What is going to be a benefit or a drawback to the company? And right now, as we go into a theorized recession, hopefully not a depression, we have to incentivize people to take risk and become players in the marketplace. So what would you say would be something that government could do from your perspective to incentivize people to get back in that marketplace and become competitive and take the risk?
Well, first of all, deregulate, be more flexible with regards to the labor laws and the labor market. That's for both sides, because it's easy. It's better for entrepreneurs and for enterprises, and also for the labor force, for employees. If there is great flexibility and they can deal with each other and can find the ideal solution. This is one thing. Second thing, of course, it's the level of taxation. High taxation, as we know, has never helped create a good business location. And the third thing, of course, is bureaucracy. Shut bureaucracy down and keep it as little as possible. And again, overall structural reforms, maybe the pension and health system, maybe the education system. All these are the big things, because Europe also has one real big problem that is or has been overlooked in the past. Is our aging as a society, and the pension bomb that we have to find a solution to.
We have a similar situation burgeoning here in the U.S. in that, and I think globally you're going to have this problem because we've seen birth rate drop, I think, across every country. I know in the United States, the birth rate has dropped fairly substantially. So yeah, same thing. You have an aging population, you have technology, medical technology that is obviously keeping us alive longer. And yeah, I don't know what we're going to
do. We also need to work longer, and
yeah.
That's not part of the system yet in our Western European societies.
Yeah. So what do you think about, kind of transitioning to a different topic, what do you think about the currency options right now that exist? Obviously, we've got the central banks and, centrally banked currencies, fiat currencies. We've got Bitcoin, which oddly enough, you'd think would have gone up as everything else goes inflation crazy, but has gone down. And then, of course, there is the standard of gold, which we all love. Where do you find yourself gravitating towards as far as a store of value? Well, what do you think the best way forward would be?
Well, first of all, I'm a big gold person. I just think this is an old tradition, and it's good to stick to those traditions. Second, and now I have to be very careful, we have to distinguish between digital currencies issued by central banks or by private institutions. Central bank digital currency is probably mostly replacing cash as we know it, and it's not a cryptocurrency in the sense that those are that are out on the market and that are competing on the private market. So these are totally two different, separate things, and I would not want to go into depth of that. But since you mentioned Bitcoin and a couple of others, I think there is one thing that is a specter that will hunt those currencies, and this is quantum computing. And we will have to see how fast those go and will be implemented, and then we can take the logic next step and see and then see how obviously those cryptos will either disappear or will be reborn in a different way. Will be, I always believe in Schumpeter and in the creativity and in this destruction. But what is good is on the regulatory level, it at least pushes back towards big government regulation, because those people are always a little bit faster
Yeah.
than the regulatory bodies, and is challenging them. But I would be very careful, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, from a regulatory standpoint, I know in the United States there's a big push to regulate cryptocurrencies. And naturally, as you'd expect, this is the people that have the power, that have the currency, that is the dominant currency, trying to push back against the upstarts. And they realize that it is a direct threat to their power. Because if nothing else, government's ability to control the currency is their ability to control virtually everything. So, is there a regulatory environment developing in Europe and in Austria that is similar to ours, where they're really trying to rein it in and basically get their pound of flesh out of people that have opted to look into these alternative currencies?
Well, I think Europe and the US is similar here. The US is always a step ahead of us with in that regards. Um, but I think we have more pressing problems these days than stepping on people's toes right now
Yeah.
with this topic. I mean, if the ECB solves the inflation problem, I think they have a lot to roll out to do and to roll up their sleeves.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think, it's interesting during a crisis to see what is prioritized by the government, right? So because we are still seeing the push for crypto regulation here in the midst of, this unbelievable amount of inflation. I'm sure you've seen that we've got our show trials going on with the January 6th insurrection, as they called it here in the United States. Again, in the middle of this massive crisis. So from your perspective, are you seeing, is inflation, is the economic aspect top of the news cycle in Europe?
Yes.
Or is it, okay, so it actually is predominant there? Because like I said, here, you wouldn't think it was even a problem because they seem to cover everything else.
No, inflation is a problem. It has hit our news. But, of course, we have the war in Ukraine going on. And so, there are certain people who blame the war in Ukraine for inflation now. And
Right,
that's,
right.
that's ridiculous. It's definitely one part of it, but not 90%, as
Yeah.
I would argue. It's a little part, a small part. It's still the supply chains, it's the agriculture prices, and all those things. But
Yeah, it's funny here. They call it Putin's price hike is what Joe Biden's administration, and of course, you roll your eyes to similar extent because inflation was running rampant well before this. So, are you seeing then? Are we seeing people become more open from on a politicians to down to regular people? Have you seen people start to discuss these different solutions to the problems that are from our perspective? Are you seeing people look to the free market and say, look, we need to find a solution for this from the marketplace, from entrepreneurs? Or are people defaulting and saying, well, what we need is more government?
well, unfortunately, it's the latter. People think that the government will find a solution. As we know, when what Reagan said, government is not the solution.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
well, that's the thing is, I'm trying to think what from a government perspective, unless it's deregulating, as we're talking about, what possible solution would it be? In
well,
California, there's a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, I mean, the thing is, provide the right framework and the rule of law. That's a task of the government, and make sure that everybody is treated equally before the law. And I think those are the things that we should also look into, and then the next steps should follow. But the extent you can argue always, the libertarian spectrum is pretty big, from no intervention at all to the order libertarians in Freiburg who argued for more government intervention. So you can go from two, but most important is individual and entrepreneurial freedom and self-responsibility. And I think this is a value that needs to be discussed. And now that we see for the next generation, at least in Europe, then the kids, the students here, they will probably not be able to buy their own house and own their own apartment or flat because they will not be able to afford it, because of this, because of the issues that we see on the monetary front these days.
I'm seeing a lot of younger generation people in the United States. I mean, I guess it could go one of two ways. It can either go that they are ultra, as we say, woke, they're ultra progressive and want pure socialism, and they want the government to run everything, or I'm seeing a growth in the younger population looking at the free market, looking at alternative currencies, and looking at a rejection of government control because of the factors you just mentioned, because they can't buy a house and they realize that the government is if they don't understand it fully, but in part responsible for the inflation in the marketplace. They are looking at censorship has been a huge aspect of turning a younger generation more against government and more towards a free market and non-censorship environment. So I'm curious to see, and being locked down, because the younger generation, 2 years locked away, not unable to see friends, unable to go to school, unable to go to work, etc. I think has drastically altered how a lot of people perceive the world. And is that something you're seeing as well? In your region, have you seen more younger people open up their minds to our perspective?
Both and but those who really open up their minds, they understand Hayek's pretense of knowledge in society. Remember his 1974 speech when he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics, when he claimed that there is no such thing as full information and that we should be humble and pretend not to know everything, and should not believe in what certain people tell us that we are supposed to believe in. So put things into questions, look at the facts and the figures, and think for yourself and make your own decision. And there are a lot of young people who are on that track, and I'm glad to know that. But with the cancel culture on the other side, there is people who just simply follow certain groups without asking.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, so Barbara, I want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything that you think that we haven't gone into that you'd like to mention, or is there anything you'd like to share with the audience here that's just on your mind? Something that you think would be timely to share, that a tidbit of knowledge from somebody who is in the know, and as I said, a very impressive figure in our movement.
Well, check out our website of the Austrian Economics Center. Check out our free market roadshow, which is freemarket-rs.com. Send us emails or work with us, look at our podcasts, and also link with Brian in order to be linked with us.
Yes, definitely.
I think the most important thing is that freedom constantly needs to be defended, because once we lose it, it's too late. So it's one of the most precious goods that we need to cherish and hold dear, and discuss and dispute, and make sure that everybody understands what it means to be a free individual and to make your own choices without any top-down interference, but without, yeah, that's it, basically.
Well, I share the sentiment completely. I'd like to thank you again, guys. Dr. Barbara Kolm, wonderful having you on the show. Wonderful seeing you again as well. I greatly enjoyed all of the time I spent over with you, with everybody. I became very close with Matt Kibbe and Terry Kibbe there, and I thank you for that. And just fantastic, guys. So check out everything that she's got going on. And if you can make it to Europe, it is well worth your time to come to the Austrian Economics Conference, to go to the Free Market Roadshow events and everything else that you guys do that is wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Brian.
A little bit more show here, by the way. So thanks to Barbara Kolm for joining me on the program today. I do want to talk about a couple more things. Actually, one of them is related because, of course, Barbara is in Austria, and I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Germany. But before I do, I want to tell you guys about Ipvanish. Ipvanish, of course, is one of the most well-known, well-renowned services to protect your IP. Of course, it is a VPN, which means you cannot be hacked by people Tracking your data on the internet. You can't be followed around by advertisers. You can protect your physical location and your IP address. And it is one of the most trusted in the industry. Of course, they've got thousands of reviews on Trustpilot, and you can get 70% off a subscription for Ipvanish by going to ipvanish.com/lions and using that promo code LIONS. Get yourself protected today and spend mere dollars a month on this to protect yourself across all of your devices, your iPad, your iPhone, your laptop, your whatever else you're using, your Roku device. One click of the button, you are across the board protected. Make sure to use this, guys. I swear by it. I don't go online without it. ipvanish.com/lions, promo code LIONS, get that big discount. And of course, guys, join our Patreon, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty for all the bonus content. The forthcoming Do Nothing Man episode, Conspiracy Corners, which we are recording one next week. It's going to be hot stuff, guys. Don't want to miss it. And you can also join on Locals, lionsofliberty.locals.com. And last thing, I will be at Freedom Fest. Go and check out the link I put in the show notes for Freedom Fest. You can get a discount of 50 buckaroonies off of the conference pass. I know I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of people there. I know Reed's going. I know Clint's going. I know the Kibbies are going. I know Dave Smith is going. So looking forward to spending some quality time again in Las Vegas. Fortunately, not having to do it in Reno. Now, a couple of things I want to address here, just current events. I was reading an article by the great C.J. Hopkins. Now, C.J. Hopkins is an author. He has been on the program before, and I'm going to have him back on because he has a new book coming out. Actually, I think the new book is out about resisting the new normal Reich. C.J. Hopkins lives in Germany. He's an American expat, lives in Germany. I guess not even expat. He's still an American citizen. Lives in Germany currently, and he's been writing pretty fantastic articles over at Consent Factory, which is his publishing house, his blog, website, about what's going on with the new normal German Reich and how these people have taken it to a level that we wouldn't even conceive of here in the United States. Well, I guess we could conceive of it because they have made every attempt to try to demonize, to try to censor, to try to obfuscate the truth in regards to COVID, in regards to the COVID regime, in regards to the biomedical fascist state that has been forced upon us. And now, as I'm seeing slowly happen, we are seeing people recount. There was a New York Times, I believe it was a New York Times author, regular columnist, who wrote how she was wrong. How this was, she sees now as the data comes out about the lack of effectiveness of the vaccines, the side effects that are pretty prevalent now, the lack of efficacy over time and the short time period in which the vaccine's effectiveness wanes during, through to the impact it's having on children, compared to the impact of the lockdowns overall. And she is now saying, look, we were wrong. Demonizing the unvaccinated was wrong. Going after these people and wrecking our families, destroying businesses, trying to limit these people's freedom of movement and demonizing them online and in mainstream media was wrong. But we know that when given power, government rarely cedes that power. And we're seeing that here in the United States. You see Fauci out there talking about, well, we might have to do another lockdown and maybe we'll do more masks. Even though Rand Paul has roundly been beating the living hell out of him in every confrontation they have within the halls of the Senate, we still see them grasping the power. They don't want to cede that power away. They don't want to even blink at the possibility that their emergency powers could be stripped from them. And in Germany, they've taken it a step farther. As C.J. Hopkins has reported on, they have gone so far in Germany as to make, quote unquote, delegitimizing the state a crime. Now, this is overly broad language, for intended purposes of giving the state permission to go in, jackbooted thugs come into your house and arrest you. And this has actually happened. There's a doctor in Germany that this has actually happened to. They took him, they literally stormed into his house, locked him up, took him away because he had the gall to argue against the COVID state that has been put in there, to argue against this biomedical fascist state that exists. And the Germans now, the Germans, are now talking about putting in place a new health rule, which would basically make masks mandatory from, I think, something like July through October, right? Because the height of the vaccine or the height of the COVID pandemic, this new variant, whatever it might be, and making this a new normal, that 6 months out of the year, you are going to need to wear a mask to go anywhere in Germany. And should you criticize that policy? Should you criticize any of the policies or criticize the power which has been given to the state out of fear, out of manipulation by the government, by the media, and by everything else out there? Should you question whether or not the government should have that power? Well, you could be found guilty of, quote, delegitimizing the state, unquote. When you have language, official language that exists within bills, within laws, in a state, you have accepted tyranny. Anything that is considered to be criticism of the state being liable for criminal prosecution is tyranny, because, as we just mentioned, it is such a broad application that you could argue that fighting a traffic ticket is delegitimizing the state, could you not? If the state is legitimate, the state has godlike powers. The state is omnipotent. The state is infallible. To criticize God, do you not negate the existence or the omnipotence of God should you criticize him? God is all-knowing. God is all-powerful. God has created everything right according to the Bible and religious scholars. If you criticize God, are you not questioning the legitimacy of God? And we have provided the state with godlike powers. And in Germany, just like criticizing God, to criticize any aspect of the state could be considered as delegitimizing that state and its absolute authority. So good luck in fighting your parking tickets, Germany. Good luck in fighting to keep your children should the state want to inundate them, inoculate them, and jab them full of whatever it might be. Should the state want to track you? Should the state want to force you into a digital currency? How dare you question the almighty authority of the state? Welcome to the Gulag. Now, one other thing I just want to transition to, and then we're going to wrap it up a little bit shorter. I think I'm not going to stick to my hour-long format. I know you guys like the longer format, but just to ramble on seems pointless, and maybe you'll enjoy shorter episodes as we all have our attention spans pulled in every which way. And I'll also try to pump out a few more shorter take episodes on Mean Age Daydream solo feed, which make sure, guys, if you haven't gone yet, subscribe, if you'd be so kind, to the Mean Age Daydream solo feed in addition to the Lions of Liberty Network. I will be publishing extra content on there on the reg, especially now that my parents are finally leaving town. They were down visiting, and I love my parents, don't get me wrong, but of course, distracting, having to juggle that with the kid and the work and everything else. But please subscribe and give me a 5-star review right up on whatever platform you're listening on. Also greatly appreciated. So, the last thing I want to talk about is Merrick Garland, who is not, as far as I know, an international liaison, who does not, as far as I know, have any sort of negotiating powers for the United States, for our military, for our operations. No, he is the Attorney General for the United States, and his primary objective is to weigh in, to prosecute domestic crimes, domestic unrest, which, by the way, is forthcoming because the Supreme Court's official ruling on Roe v. Wade is supposed to be dropping any day now. Now, they've delayed it. Maybe they'll further delay it until this bill to protect our Supreme Court justices get through. But point being, if I were Merrick Garland, my primary objective right now would be trying to secure the United States against a promised, quote-unquote, night of rage. And this is what the pro-abortion activists, the pro-choice activists are saying is going to happen. They are promising a night of rage, aka destruction of private property for people that have little to nothing to do with the abortion argument. And of course, the burning down of private property in the way of abortion prevention centers, crisis help centers, whatever you want to call them. And I actually just did a good morning fuckhead. Here's my father calling me on the cell phone. I said my parents are in town, calling me 50 times a day. So I just did a GMF. I didn't mean to. I was going to bleep this so I could air it and Barbara could share it without any curses. And then I mentioned my morning rant show, GMF. Well, one F-bomb is going to hurt things. So GMF this week, I talked about how they're Democratic senators trying to make search results, map results for pregnancy centers that are not pro-choice, right? That are not abortion clinics, but in fact are crisis centers to try to help women come to a different conclusion or provide support, etc. They're trying to make those results non-findable should you search for abortion. So these people are psychotically serious about making sure that that babies don't necessarily come out. So to have Merrick Garland now, in the wake of this, with the promised Night of Rage forthcoming, traipse off to the Ukraine to meet with their, I don't know, inspector general, their whatever the functionary over there is that heads up their Department of State and its a criminal division. Well, he's now going over to the Ukraine because obviously it's vitally important that the United States works to combine with the Ukraine, who of course is at war with Russia and has a vested interest, by the way, in not reporting things accurately insofar as how the war is going and potential war crime being perpetrated. Well, Merrick Garland's going over there to make sure to collaborate with him so that the United States can now accuse Russia of formal war crimes and obviously boost our ongoing relationship with that nuclear-armed country. You gotta love it, right? You gotta love the priorities and the prioritization of a foreign entanglement that has literally nothing to do with us over any number of the domestic issues that we're facing, from the economic woes to the supply chain woes to the Roe versus Wade to the promised racial issues that we're being told are dividing the country at all times to the COVID fascist regime. That stuff doesn't matter. Merrick Garland, obviously bigger fish to fry in prodding the bear that is Russia. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. All right, that's going to wrap it up, guys. I do want to make one announcement. I am formally going to launch a GoFundMe / Patreon, well, Patreon really, for Do Nothing Man. I find that I am going to be more inspired to get episodes out regularly. Of course, if you're part of the Lions of Liberty Patreon or Lions of Liberty Pride, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. You can join and get the Do Nothing Superman, Libertarian Superman episodes that I put out, my radio drama that I'm going to work on to get animated. Now, the idea behind this is that I am so busy that I think having some financial weight on the table for me and also some, I guess, some culpability to keep a regular schedule and cranking these episodes out is going to be vital. Because it keeps me on track knowing I have a promised date. I need to make an episode, every 2 months and get that out to people that are paying me money to do it. So this is the idea, guys. I'm going to launch it. It's not up yet. I'm going to set that up this week. But just know, if you love Do Nothing Man, and check that out, Google Do Nothing Man. They're on YouTube, and you can find them in our feed. If you like that, if you want to support me in creating something I think could be a very potent, very funny exercise in libertarian thinking, then please consider supporting me in that endeavor. And as I said, so I can crank them out real regularly and also get these things animated, which I think is going to take it to the next level. All right. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me here on Mean Age Daydream. Please remember we have several shows here in the Lions Liberty Network. Go subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Share the show if you'd be so kind as well. And remember, check out Barbara Kolm and everything she's doing with the Austrian Economics Center, the Free Market Roadshow, the Hayek Institute. Amazing work spreading liberty, spreading free markets throughout Europe. Very impressive lady, and I hope you will check her out. And if you got a little bit of extra dosh, guys, it is very fun to go over to Europe and go to these events that they put on. And I look forward to visiting myself. All right, other than that, have a lovely time. Guys, keep those electric eyes on me, babe. And keep that ray gun to my head.